Well, when it is Wednesday, we're lucky to have this extraordinary next guest. Bobby Charles has such an incredible resume of expertise, but today I want to bring him in for one particular reason. He's not only the national spokesman for AMAC, but he was an assistant secretary of state under George W. Bush who helped train police forces all across the world on behalf of the United States. And what we're learning about our Secret Service makes us think, boy, something has fallen really short. Bobby, good to have you on the show today.
Great to be with you, John, and that's a great topic.
Yeah, so there are amazing moments in the hearing yesterday where you hear the Secret Service saying, listen, the police and I weren't clearly synced. The local police, who they seem to be relying on for some of the Secret Service's core duties, they weren't synced. They can't explain why they didn't cover a rooftop that was an obvious shooter's perch. And they can't explain why they didn't identify some of the risks that were going on. Like, why doesn't the Secret Service see the drone flying 2 hours earlier? When you look at that Secret Service and you held them to just the standards you would have held a foreign police force that you were training with U.S. funds, what would you say about the Secret Service that we got to see yesterday?
You know, it's very, very disappointing, John. I mean, not only have I worked in two White Houses where the Secret Service to me were like a civilian Delta Force. They were extraordinary in what they did. Their capabilities within what they could do were just unbelievable. Three things sort of come to mind right away. One is that there's burden shifting and then there's responsibility shifting. Burden shifting is when you're sharing a burden with someone else. Responsibility shifting is when it was your job and you blame somebody else. And the first thing I see in this Secret Service leadership is a disgrace in terms of leadership. Leadership is about stepping up and taking responsibility. And what does that mean? It means you don't just step up and say, hey, you can blame me and now I go on with my job. No, that's not how that works. You take responsibility, meaning you either fix it right now, or if it was your responsibility that it was supposed to be fixed and you didn't fix it or you let it go to pieces on your watch, you leave the show, you resign. So I think we might see multiple levels of resignation here or early retirement because this is a Secret Service that is not performing up to standard. Number two, the idea that they would shift this off onto local law enforcement. Secret Service has never been in the business of deferring or deflecting their responsibility to local law enforcement. Local law enforcement is of various qualities and various levels of training. Secret Service is supposed to be the most elite federal law enforcement organization. No kidding. I mean, people start out at ATF or DEA or FBI and they aspire to ultimately one day be part of Secret Service. It is supposed to be the cream of the cream of the cream of the crop. And the last part I'll tell you in terms of the foreign, I trained police in 50 countries. I set up all the police training in Iraq and in Afghanistan in 7 locations. Never mind, we support our allies in police training. You do, and I can say this also as a former 10-year military officer, you do what you train to do so that when all hell breaks loose and crisis is around you, you default to your training. And what did we see? The training was obviously subpar and perhaps even non-existent on critical elements because when all hell broke loose, they didn't know what to do. Their comms were upside down. They were running back and forth like they were part of the chaos. And the point of someone who is in a position of authority to bring order in the midst of chaos is to know exactly what you're doing. And I come back to this core element, John. You do what you train to do. You can't cover it up. Okay. It's a fundamental fact. If you're a firefighter and you have to go into a burning building, you do what you were trained to do. You do it on instinct. The same thing is true as in the intelligence and special operations. And the same thing is true in law enforcement. And God bless law enforcement. Honestly, they do harder training than 99% of America. And yet the field agents, if they are given poor training, if they are given poor direction, if they are excused away from taking responsibility, ultimately, things roll downhill. And it bothers me, John, because I think it's systemic. I think they must have had earlier warning about this. And I also think that virtually every law enforcement organization right now needs to look hard at their leadership because this may well be emblematic.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And the communication is such an important aspect of law enforcement. And it's clear that the detail that was protecting the president didn't have clear visibility for the 10, 20, 30 minutes out, or maybe even an hour before 100 minutes if you take the Grassley timeline, what was going out on the perimeter with the suspicions about this way before he got up in the rough and started firing shots. it's one-on-one police, right? You got to be able to communicate with each other.
It's one-on-one. Look, communications. You have the ability to put something on target, and you have communications. If in intelligence, we used to say, in essence, communications late is useless. So the bottom line here is you have to know what you know as fast as you can know it, and then you have to put it into practice. The fact that they could have known, it's like a double fault. It's not just that they didn't know some things, it's that they knew some things that were critical to preventing this event, and they didn't act on them. And so a failure of communications is ultimately a failure of leadership, and a failure of leadership means somebody needs to rethink the entire organization. Sometimes you just need to strip the paint off the thing and start all over again. And I look at this example of what happened. It's not a one-off, John. It's not a one-off. When you have failed communications, which is why we have such a priority on communications historically, when you have failed communications and failed operations and a near death of a president, it's showing you the tip of a fin, and there's a shark under there. There's a real problem, and we need to get after the real problem.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. And because it has a zero fail mission, these sort of chinks in the armor, these major cracks in their capability has to be fixed quickly because the consequences are going to be lethal. Otherwise, a second part of this is we go back to something we broke a year ago, which I think was the second big warning. I think the very first big warning about the Secret Service came with Jason Chaffetz back in 2015. He did a great investigation that said, hey, they're taking on more and more responsibilities, have nothing to do with presidential protection, and they're not resourcing properly. And at some time, they're going to start robbing Peter to pay Paul. That was a warning 10 years ago. We see some of that in yesterday's testimony. The other warning was a year ago, we got the video. We were exclusive on this. We got this videotape showing that the Secret Service brought Vice President-elect Kamala Harris within 10 yards of a bomb because its own team didn't detect during the sweep this bomb, which is something that the Secret Service is like expert at. They know how to find bombs. They clearly, at the Democratic National Committee on the morning of January 6th, drove their protectee past a live bomb at the Democratic National Committee because they didn't detect it during their sweep. When you see that was a big warning. The idea that the core capabilities, because they didn't find a bomb while sweeping the property. They didn't find the roof as a security threat while sweeping the property. It seems like some of the basics of surveillance and identification of threats has weakened in a way I would never expect from the Secret Service.
Yeah, so let me say two things, John. The job that the Secret Service does and the job that actually local law enforcement all the way up through state law enforcement and federal law enforcement does is essentially a combination of mind reading and fast reaction based on good planning and strategic thinking. And so you're trying to read the mind of a bad guy and get in there and stop. However, bad guys follow patterns, and bad guys are detectable through all kinds of both technical, human. We have all kinds of ints without getting into them. And so you have a lot of information feed. What you're pointing to is that this hard job is usually done well by American law enforcement and done the best by an organization like Secret Service because they have singularity of purpose, they have unity of mission, they're not diffuse in the way that they look at the world, and they're not in the business of making excuses. There are no excuses. There's no excuse that ever works. So when you step up in a military or civilian environment, and it could even be in a political environment, it could also be in an environment like a surgeon in an operating room. When you step up and say, there's no answer out of this except success, and in this case, your mission is to protect a president or a vice president or a protectee, what you're describing and what you're seeing, I think, is the fraying or the disillusion or the disintegration or the erosion of leadership, of responsibility, of mission cohesion, and of operational outcomes. And when you see that, it tells you that we have something really serious going on here. It's kind of like, if I may make the analogy, when Joe Biden is unfit and everybody covers for him, okay, it tells you something about the people that are covering for him. And when you see an organization of this magnitude making a mistake of that kind, you know that other people in the organization knew damn well that everything was drifting out to sea. And yet they either were silenced or they were not allowed to, or they were told their careers were in jeopardy. And I'm going to tell you right now, if it's happening at the Secret Service, it's happening at FBI, DEA, ATF, federal protective, it's all over the government. It's like a lack of leadership and failure of responsibility is like an infectious disease. It spreads if you don't stop it.
Yeah, no, it's really, really important, and the stakes could not be higher. And I want to ask you, when you looked at the deputy director of the FBI and you looked at the acting director of the Secret Service, was there a sense with you that they were on top of the issues that caused this failure and really committed to the sort of sweeping reform that will create prevention, or did you have an uneasy feeling? Some people say an uneasy feeling. Some people say, I think they got it. I'm curious what you saw, because you evaluated this all the time. This is what you did at the State Department.
It is. So human nature, I often think it's more important to understand human nature than to understand physics. Because if you can look somebody in the eye and you can look hard at them and you put the questions to them and they react a certain way, it's just the same way that we use a polygraph, but you can do it in a personal way too. And what I see here is likely people who knew that the ship was drifting out to sea, and people who are embarrassed that they knew and they didn't act. That are one of the most immediate reactions to people who get embarrassed because they know they should have done something is to become defensive. They know that they are in part responsible for something that has occurred that really has created an outcome that now people are examining them on. And so I think what I saw here, John, is, leadership failures are at different levels of magnitude and at different levels of authority. And if a platoon commander gets his people killed because he did something stupid, he bears responsibility for that. If the general officer who gave the command and then the platoon leader goes out and tries to execute the command, well, there may be responsibility at each level, but it's different. In this particular instance, you have leadership of a major, arguably the most elite law enforcement organization, which down through multiple layers had to know that they were failing. They had to know that their training was inapt. They had to know that they were not ready for things that were happening. And you know why? Because like the thing you described with Kamala Harris, if you encounter a friendly fire situation or you encounter a situation where you know a mistake has been made, you need to redouble everything. You need to drop everything and go back and do an after action and make sure that never happens again. They don't do that. They're obviously not doing that. So what are we witnessing, John? We're witnessing, as we're seeing in the political circle, we're now seeing on the operational side that when leadership fails, it begins to fail down the ladder. And I think we need to stop. We need to shake ourselves loose. We need to get back after what we believe are top standards. And we need to start thinking the way they were thinking 30 years ago, that under no circumstances can anything bad happen, and it's my responsibility. It's as if the entire thing depended on me alone. That's how Secret Service agents used to think. They would think it is all on me. And that's the way you got to think.
Yeah, that is the key mentality. And it doesn't feel like, just looking now at all the things we saw that day, that they were thinking that way. Certainly not in the preparation. There's a moment where I think Chuck Grassley puts out a presentation. It was the morning of the event, July 13th, and the local police have let's get all together one more time and touch gloves. And the Secret Service doesn't show up for that meeting, even though they know that those partners are going to be doing some of the security work there. Really shocking to see that they wouldn't show up at that meeting and make sure that they were synced with the people that they were relying on for some responsibilities. Really, really remarkable stuff. All right, folks, don't go anywhere. More of our exclusive interview with Bobby Charles right after these messages.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you'd do if you had an extra hour in your day? Maybe you'd see a movie by yourself, take a rejuvenating nap, curl up with a good book, or catch up with an old friend. Or maybe you just enjoy doing nothing for once. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you so that you can make it a priority. And therapy can help you figure that out. A therapist can guide you through the process of defining your values and understanding your priorities, so you know what things you can spend your time on that will really fulfill you. Otherwise, you'll always be wishing for more time. BetterHelp offers convenient, affordable online therapy that comes to you. Start the process in minutes and switch therapists anytime. Learn how to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/tryit today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/tryit.
Homes.com knows that when it comes to home shopping, it's never just about the house or condo. It's about the home. And what makes a home is more than just the house or property. It's the location and neighborhood. If you have kids, it's also schools, nearby parks, and transportation options. That's why Homes.com goes above and beyond to bring home shoppers the in-depth information they need to find the right home. And when I say in-depth, I'm talking deep. Each listing features comprehensive information about the neighborhood, complete with a video guide. They also have details about local schools with test scores, state rankings, and student-to-teacher ratio. They even have an agent directory with the sales history of each agent. So, when it comes to finding a home, not just a house, this is everything you need to know all in one place. Homes.com. We've done your homework.
All right, folks, welcome back. More of our exclusive interview with Bobby Charles. Where does this go? When you look, I mean, you fixed many things in your career. You were asked to fix things you as an chief oversight counsel. How do we really fix this? Is this nonpartisan task force in the House the way to go? Or is there something more dramatic that needs to be done?
Yeah, I think something, even though I'm in favor of a commission to look it over, I honestly think it gets much more quickly than that. You need to step up to what needs to be done. You need a core group of people who, first of all, understand, accept, and communicate the truth of what happened. That can happen within days. You need that group to now take full responsibility for a remake, a complete strip down, literally a top to bottom review as quickly as possible that then puts in place training, firings, rehirings, hirings, puts in place an organization in which people can have absolute confidence. It's not just the President of the United States and the Vice President and protectees that need confidence. It's the average American that needs confidence in the ability of our federal and state law enforcement, but in particular an organization like Secret Service, to protect their leadership. So, when you encounter something like this, and the last piece of that is that you need to put an action plan in place that immediately moves to fixing things. Right after 9/11, we grounded all the planes and we began a complete relook at what went wrong. And yeah, there was later in a commission and it produced a report and there were strategic blah, blah, blah. But the reality is you need to look at this from an operational perspective. We have protectees right now all over the United States that are probably asking themselves, if it can happen to a former president, it can happen to me. And you've got people literally going to events and going to be. I was at an event in Detroit where Trump was maybe a month and a half ago, and they had failed to sweep in the morning, and they had to literally clear the entire place out and re-sweep the place again. Now, was that the Secret Service? Was that local? Was that the Secret Service fobbing it off onto local? I don't know, but the core principle is take responsibility and do the right thing. Okay, if that's the principle on which everybody in the Secret Service operated, this would never have happened. Someone had to have known something ahead of time, and they certainly knew there were failures in both training and operations. So, at the end of the day, John, what do you do to fix it? You get everybody together in one room. You say, look, I don't want to hear excuses. I don't want to hear that it was someone else's fault. I don't want to hear any of that. It's like the dinner table. I want you to take responsibility for what you didn't do right. I want you to work with me to get this right as soon as we can get it right. I want coordination. I want communication. I don't want this ever to happen again.
That's the way things used to get fixed. I hope it happens this time because there's so many big stakes. I want to ask about one other thing that really caught my attention. The flip-flop of the FBI. Chris Wray suggested, maybe it wasn't a bullet. And then within 24 hours, the FBI says, we always knew it was a bullet. Why would the director do that? How does that happen?
Completely irresponsible. Again, there are a number of situations. I worked for Colin Powell. I watched very senior people fired. Okay. There are a lot of situations in which if you start to make excuses or you become one of the political players like Comey did and like Wray has multiple times, there comes a point where, of course, the guy that would need to fire him would be Biden and or Merrick Garland, and both of them are corrupt, in my view, are corrupted. So, they're simply politically compromised. They're not. Public corruption sort of is how they operate. So they're not going to fire him. But, the bottom line is when you start making excuses that affect the public dialogue, pretending that you are a player and you're going to shift this from being an assassination attempt or from being a bullet that clearly hit the president to being something shy of that. Maybe you think you're trying to build kudos by trying to build some sort of backslap from the Secret Service because you're now at the FBI. I don't know. I had to work with Chris Wray in a prior life. I didn't find him very impressive. I found him very often sort of just carrying the party line. And, those are stories for another day. But I will tell you that to me, it was a disgrace. And if somebody said to me, after you have all the medical records, that you're going to deflect this and try to create a political goodie out of it and say it wasn't an assassination attempt or it didn't a bullet didn't hit him, I think you're not just splitting hairs. You're literally trying to play into the process with a false narrative, and that to me is inexcusable. That gets you out of the game. That's firing. That's removal territory.
Yeah, it's a very good point. One last piece on this. I want to, while the Secret Service's failures have been significant and there's been a lot of finger pointing and excuse making and double talk and double speak, several members of Congress have shown real quickly that you can do meaningful oversight quickly. All the whistleblowers that have come forward, Chuck Grassley, Ron Johnson, Barry Loudermilk, and James Comer, and Josh Hawley. I'm probably missing a couple, but one of the things that I was most impressed with, because sometimes Congress hasn't been doing a good job on oversight all the time, a really quick, fast, assertive effort to get the truth out and to get it credibly out with whistleblowers and documents. As someone who used to run that machinery, how would you grade Congress's early oversight on this?
Honestly, I'd give them really good ranks. And to the extent that some Democrats joined with them, I'd give them good ranks too. I will tell you that having run the better part of the oversight, including oversight of Justice, Defense, State, NASA, for 5 years, it's a hard thing to, there's a balance between jumping to conclusions and getting the good information out as fast as you've got it. Again, it's a communications element, but I think they've done a really good job. And I will tell you that this is one reason why having oversight committees that are not that are in the other party is useful. I mean, it's not necessary, but it's useful. And I think what happens is honesty. If you have divided government in some form, or free speech, if you will, and vocal oversight personnel bringing things to the public eye, obviously the public needs to constantly use their own scrutiny because you can end up with just political machinations. And we tried very hard to stay away from those in my days. We often did things that seemed boring, but they were important: inventory management, et cetera. But in this situation, they got out with good information quickly to the American people. And the real purpose of oversight is to cause change to occur as a result of public awareness. Authorizers, legally create a statute that allows something to happen. Appropriators put money behind it. But oversight people are really the truth seekers in the world. They're the ones whose entire job is based on finding truth and getting it out to the public as fast as possible. So I honestly think every one of the members you mentioned, and probably a dozen more of whom half are Democrats, that I would give credit that they have stepped up to understand that this was a failure of the Biden-Harris administration. This is a failure of the Secret Service. This is a failure of all the people who have tried to cover up for this. And it's a failure of the people who remain silent. As Edmund Burke so famously said, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. And that includes silence when bad things happen and need to be brought to the American people. The people have a right to know, and that's what oversight's all about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not the government's information. It's the American people's information. So important. All right, I want to turn to one other thing. The great journalist Matt Taibbi, openly liberal, but been willing to call his own side out, has a remarkable new article out today. The headline is, and I'm just going to read it because I couldn't do it any better than what he did. Having covered up Joe Biden's infirmity for years, the news media moves to whitewash the bizarre record of Kamala Harris. The last week, there have been some pretty extraordinary backflips by the news media trying to erase her title as border czar, trying to claim that all the things she stood for in 2020 that were to the far left of Joe Biden, which is pretty far left, weren't meaningful, didn't happen. She didn't mean what she said. How would you referee the first 10, 12 days of media coverage of Kamala Harris?
Well, I'm trying to think of the right metaphor, John. This is a house sliding. The Democratic Party is a house sliding off a cliff, and the mainstream media is in their basement or their garage sliding off the cliff with them. And what they're trying to do, they're backpedaling and trying to make Kamala Harris look like the answer to this horrific cover-up of Joe Biden's mental failures and somehow give her, blow wind into the sails. And the problem is it really doesn't work. The average American knows all about Kamala Harris. They know she was the most left-leaning senator for the brief period of time she was a senator. They know it was not high integrity the way she made herself get forward in California. They know that she was pumped up by Barack Obama during the period of time when she wanted to become an AG of California. They know that she has a horrible record as an AG of California. They know she has a terrible record as the so-called border czar. She hasn't done anything there. They know that she has a hard time stringing words together that make sense. They know that she's got a really pockmarked record when it comes to anything tied to involvement in serious policy. So what they've done is this is really an integrity issue for the media, if you want to know the truth. The media covered up Joe Biden, and now they're covering up Kamala Harris. And as this writer indicates, John, we're in a position where people are hungry for truth. And one of the things that's happening is eyesight, perception, how people read what they understand what they read is all becoming sharper by the average American. The average American now doesn't believe a lot of what they read, and they don't believe a lot of what they are told by the political organizations, and in particular by the Democrats. And at this point, it becomes kind of like an open joke. It's almost like a self-mockery. They've become a caricature of themselves. This Kamala Harris has become, if Kamala Harris is now a saint and a great policymaker, I think, the world is upside down and the sun's going to rise in the west tomorrow. People know that. People understand that this is a fake. And so I think what's going to happen is it's like running room on very thin ice, and eventually the ice runs out or breaks. And I think she's look, they can try, who knows? They might even find that by the convention, she has failed them so badly because she can't hold her own, and because the fakeness of this promotion of her has become so obvious that there's no there, that they may shift out again. We're in a strange environment, John, and this is an individual who has failed every test that she has ever had, and the Democrats themselves know that. They booted her out of their Democratic primary, the first of a dozen candidates when she ran in the first instance. So, and they made all these excuses for Joe Biden, and now they're making them for Kamala Harris. And I think the average American is smarter than that. You can fool some of the people, all the time, and all the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. And I think all the people all the time is where we are right now. And I think Americans are going to not let that happen.
Well, you said something that I think is profoundly true. Americans got so tired of being burned by the legacy media that they no longer trust it, and that they're more discerning, right? They go out and they look at other sources. That's why they would turn to AMAC for the great news feed you have, or Just the News. There's a moment where the media has, in many ways, made itself less relevant to the dialogue by being wrong so often, or being so biased and unneutral so often. And that's a good reminder, everybody, what Bobby just said. If you want to say, I want to be part of that movement, I want to make sure that there are other sources of news out there like AMAC, like Just the News, go to AMAC today and get a 1-year membership for $1. That's a great deal. amac.us/justnews. Now, we do lots of great partnerships with AMAC on news. And of course, we're lucky to have Bobby on the show every week. But AMAC has its own news feed, which is really good. I check it every morning. I learn lots of things. You could too. You get all of that, plus a monthly magazine, a discount card that every time you go traveling, you're going to save money, or every time you're looking for insurance, you're going to save money. There's offers on Medicare and other insurance products, and an incredible community of patriots where you can go out and work together with people who share your values, who love this country. Go talk to your legislator. Go talk to your member of Congress. Go be an election observer. Patriotic duty, civic opportunities that are really unparalleled. $1 for a whole year. Go to amac.us/justnews. Bobby, that's the best deal you're going to get, right?
It is. And let me just say one sort of bottom line here. AMAC is probably the best. If you love America, AMAC is the best deal you could ever get. Why? Because it's not just news. As in, it's not just we're going to rehash or we're going to try to dig up something. It's actually historically grounded. I have a piece up today on the history of vice presidents becoming a president. AMAC.us, you can see it. Bottom line is, AMAC is about historically rooted, truth-grounded, often faith-based very patriotic, constitutionally centered thinking that then goes out with that mindset and tries to find the things that other people don't find. Just like you, John, are one of the best investigators around, you present things other people don't know. AMAC does the same thing, and it's an inexpensive way. Yeah, you get all the economic benefits, and you get a beautiful magazine, and you get all these other things, but it's a movement is what it is. AMAC is out there with millions of Americans, literally right today. There are AMAC members on the Hill. I just got a call earlier today in congressional offices talking to people. There are people at the state level working with their legislatures. Bottom line is, if you want to be part of the solution, if you want to help America, amac.us is the way to do it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And you're not getting a service. You know what you're getting? You're joining a community of patriots. It really is like being in a neighborhood of like-minded patriots who care about this country. It's so much more than just a service. So go do it today, guys. amac.us/justnews. You will not regret it. It's an incredible, incredible investment. Bobby, it's always a great investment of time when we talk to you. We learn so much, and you're leaning in on the Secret Service. I think your history of being able to train law enforcement effectively, I think you put your finger on what was probably going to be the big bombshells we're going to learn in the next few days about further failures, further warnings. And what a great opportunity to have you first on this show talking about it.
Well, I appreciate it, John, and I would tell you that you are one of the few people that keep reminding us that there are solutions to what I'll call the accountability crisis in this country, and I think we just have to keep finding those solutions.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is. It's one of our great opportunities to just, if we give people the facts, they're smart enough to make a good decision. That's one of the things I'm really certain of.
Yep.
All right, my friend, we'll do it again next week. I look forward to it every week. One of my favorite conversations all week long. Bobby, thanks so much.
Thank you.